So let's say you're out late at night, having fun with your friends, hanging out, and you eventually decide that you want to go home. And as you're driving home, the police stop you and they say that, they're stopping you on suspicion of drunk driving. Now, they tell you that they want you to perform these field sobriety tests before they decide if they're going to let you go. Now, you have no problem with doing the field sobriety test, but you know that the advice that you always get is to refuse field sobriety tests if you're ever asked. And so you're standing here with the police, you know you're supposed to refuse, but you don't know why. And so that's the big question that we're going to answer today. What happens if you refuse field sobriety tests? So the first thing that you need to know is that if an officer is asking you to do field sobriety tests, they need it to establish probable cause to arrest you. And so if they're asking, they may not have enough to establish probable cause to arrest. And so by you doing the field sobriety test, you're helping them establish the probable cause to arrest you, yourself. And so for the most part, standard field sobriety tests, they're not really going to help you. They're actually going to hurt you because you're helping the police officer arrest you. Most of the time, if a police officer stops you, they only see you maybe swaying, or maybe you missed the stop sign, maybe you didn't use your turn signal. Those are things that people do every day, but that doesn't mean that you're driving under the influence. However, if you fail field sobriety tests, they can certainly use all of those clues to determine if you're under the influence. They have the ability to now observe you outside of your vehicle. They're observing you walk. They're looking into your eyes. They're looking at you stand on one leg, and so many other things. That's a lot different than just observing you miss one traffic signal. So by refusing the field sobriety test, you now give the officer less information to determine if they have probable cause to arrest you, which now helps you more than it helps them. Number two, if you have an injury or a recent or former injury, it may be in your best interest to refuse field sobriety tests. Normally, a police officer who is certified in standard field sobriety tests will ask you, or they should ask you, if you have any injuries, right? If you have an injury, the answer should be yes, all right? That's assuming if you're answering the police officer's questions in the first place, right? But that gives you a good reason to refuse field sobriety tests. A lot of the times, especially with men who have previous injuries, they'll say no. Oh, I'm fine today. I can stand, I can walk, and that's okay. But if you've had a major, let's say, knee injury, ankle injury, leg injury with your arms, or any other injury at all, it would probably be in your best interest to refuse the field sobriety test because you don't know how it's going to affect you performing the field sobriety test anyway. So usually most major injuries, they linger for years and years to come. And the field sobriety tests, not only do they test your ability to pay attention to instructions, but they also test your ability to use certain muscle groups. And so if you're not able to correctly use those muscle groups for purposes of field sobriety tests, you now fail. But sometimes it's not your fault. Sometimes it could be due to an injury that you didn't realize was going to affect your ability to perform field sobriety tests. And so if you have an injury, probably in your best interest to refuse field sobriety tests. And the third thing that you should know is that regardless of whether you've been drinking or not, believe it or not, most people actually fail field sobriety tests. They are made so that even the average person who has not been drinking fails the test. This is actually a well-known statistic, so it certainly isn't in your interest to take the field sobriety test if it is more likely that you're going to fail them just because of the nature of how these tests are done. The clues that the officers look for are not clues that the average person would be aware of. So for instance, one of the things that a police officer looks for is your ability to pay attention to the instructions of the test before you actually perform the test. And one that I see in a lot of my DUI cases, in one of the tests, for instance, like the walk and turn test, you are supposed to keep your hands to your side while the officer is reading the instructions. Most people don't stand like that. People will stand with their arms folded, or people may stand with hands in their pockets. But if you don't stand the way the officer is telling you to stand during the instruction phase of the test, you can actually fail the test. So there are little simple things that most people don't know that they are being tested on that cause them to fail these tests. And so understand that especially if you have not been drinking, if you now fail this field sobriety test, you've just given the officer probable cause to arrest you for a DUI when you're not under the influence and when you haven't been drinking. So it certainly doesn't help you, especially if you haven't been drinking, to take a field sobriety test and now put the officer in a place to now arrest you and inconvenience you and take you into custody for a DUI charge. So those are the three most important things that you need to know about refusing standard field sobriety tests. So I hope that information was helpful to you. If you have any other questions, feel free to comment them down below and I'm always happy to answer them. Or you can message me on my website, MyDcLaw.com, and I'm happy to chat with you further. As always, stay safe, take care, and I'll see you soon.